Ladies and gentlemen, this is Australia's Energy Minister, Chris Blackout Bowen. Now, this bloke has come up with some great furphies over the years. He's spoken some absolute nonsense and rubbish across a whole range of subjects. But I think his latest statement takes the cake. We know the man was under pressure because that day we'd had another announcement that electricity prices were rising yet again, a further 9%. So perhaps his excuse is the bloke was completely under pressure and made silly statements. But just have a listen to this to show how completely out of touch this bloke is, that he doesn't have a clue what he is talking about.
Firepower. Here's one fact. Over the last 2 years, there hasn't been a single day, not one, in which we haven't had a coal-fired power station break down unexpectedly. That's why relying on coal-fired power for longer is the biggest threat to reliability and the biggest risk for causing blackouts.
Well, what absolute nonsense. That is taking gaslighting of the public to a new level. And it's hard to know where to start to go through and debunk this nonsense being spewed by our Energy Minister. But firstly, just remember, we are a nation that relies heavily on coal as an export to pay our way in the world. Coal is one of our most important exports in this nation, and yet here we have the Energy Minister that's meant to be in charge of energy out there saying our number one export is unreliable and expensive. Whose side is this bloke on to go out and falsely demonise Australia's major export? Seriously. And Blackout's comments that coal is unreliable and expensive must come as news to our friends up in China. For China currently have 1,147 gigawatts of active coal-fired power stations. That is the size of the Chinese fleet, 1,147. We have 21 gigawatts. So China today actually has greater capacity of coal-fired power stations per capita than Australia does. And what are China doing? Are they saying this coal is unreliable and inexpensive? No. China have today an additional 421 gigawatts of coal-fired power, either under active construction or under development. That is more than 20 times our coal-fired existing fleet. We've got 21 gigawatts. That is our existing fleet, which we are closing down under the policies of the Labor and Liberal Party. And China are up there today with another 421 gigawatts of coal-fired capacity under development and construction. And here we have the Energy Minister telling us coal is unreliable and inexpensive. What is unreliable is intermittent solar and wind, electricity generated from those sources. We know that solar goes to sleep, breaks down completely every time the sun sets, which in winter is for about 16 hours at a time. And the variability of wind goes from virtually nothing up and down all over the place. Completely unreliable wind power. And just as an example, take yesterday at 7 p.m. Solar had gone to sleep, broken down completely. We were getting zero electricity to the national grid from solar power. And here in New South Wales, we were getting 1.4% of our electricity from wind power. Wind was working at a capacity factor yesterday afternoon of around 6 or 7%. So that means 90% plus of the capacity of wind power wasn't available. It wasn't working because the wind wasn't blowing. More than 90% unreliable capacity. And Bowen's telling us that coal is the unreliable source. Seriously, this bloke does not have a clue what he's talking about. He is a clear and present danger to the economic prosperity of our nation. And the Liberal Party are no better. They are also signed up to this nonsense of net zero, which sees us wanting to close down our last remaining 21 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations. Unless we end this madness, we end this net zero nonsense, we end this stupidity of these Paris targets, and we start building new coal-fired power stations in this nation, electricity prices will continue to increase. The evidence is clear from around the world. The more intermittent generation you put into your grid, the higher the prices go, simply because you have to back up that intermittent generation. You've got to pay for all the extra transmission lines to hook up the solar and wind panels located in remote locations around the country. And it also forces inefficiency and dysfunction onto your existing baseload generators that have to ramp up and down every day to accommodate the intermittency and the unreliability of the solar and wind power. That causes those generators to operate at a higher cost and with less efficiency. That's why if we continue down this path, this mad path of thinking we can power this nation with solar panels, winds and big batteries, we will become the poor man of Asia.